Closing in, Taliban fighters are now within 30 miles of the Afghan capital. Many of those in the city who can get out are getting out. Good evening. So, in the most diarised defeat in modern military history, the next chapter looms, the fall of the Afghan capital. The country's president addresses the nation instead of resigning, as expected. He says urgent talks are underway with his allies. Officials say there is no immediate threat to the capital, but Afghans and foreign visitors are lining up to leave. The list of countries shutting embassies grows. American and British troops are moving in to help the evacuation. Also tonight, how come Plymouth gunman was allowed to get his shotgun back after allegations of an assault? Police begin a formal investigation into the Devon and Cornwall force. And after the floods and the fires, the facts. US scientists announced that July this year was the hottest month on planet Earth since records began. So the Afghan president, Ashraf Ghani, defied expectation and remained in post today, telling Afghans he's holding urgent talks with local and international leaders to find a way to halt the Taliban offensive across Afghanistan. The relentless push by the Taliban to capture more territory is intensifying, with most of the country now under the fighters' control, as seen here in red, as they close in on the key city of Mazar-e-Sharif in the north and inch closer to the capital, Kabul. While the US and UK have begun rushing in troops to evacuate embassy staff. Just 50 miles south of the capital, Kabul, another government convoy destroyed in an ambush as the province of Logar falls to the Taliban. Survivors pulled from ditches and taken away to an unknown fate. Also increasingly in Taliban hands, American-made military equipment. Armoured vehicles here, the spoils of war in an advance towards victory. Finally today, Afghans heard from their president. As his writ dissolves before his eyes, he didn't resign as expected, appearing to think he can still talk his way out of this.
Therefore, I have started extensive consultations inside the government with the elders and political leaders, representatives of people from all walks of life, and our international partners. Swift consultations are going on, and the results will soon be shared with you, my dear compatriots.
But talking to whom and about what exactly is unclear. He praised his Western-trained, Western-equipped, Western-funded army currently being defeated.
I know that you are worried about your present and future. I assure you that as your president, my focus is to prevent further instability, violence, and displacement of our people.
In the northern city of Mazar-e-Sharif, government troops prepare. It's the focus of the latest Taliban advance. President Ghani visited just a few days ago to try and shore things up. In Taliban-held Herat, the regional capital of Western Afghanistan, fighters calling for calm and a return to normality. Taliban normality.
Offices will start their work from tomorrow. Herat is a huge city. Business continues as normal and people are happy with us and our services. They will be happier.
In the capital, Kabul, many who have visas for foreign travel and can get out are getting out. And beyond Afghanistan, the West left hand-wringing by Washington, pondering the mess America has caused from the second it announced a date for its troop departure, the diarising of defeat.
I think miscalculation of the strength of the Taliban and the resilience of the Afghan forces is something that we've got to address. We can't just say, well, decision's been made, we walk away now. Let's convene urgently, lead on the international stage, and put in an appropriate response to the request that's come this morning.
As he spoke, the Americans and British operation is underway to airlift troops back to Afghanistan, no longer to fight this time, but to assist the exit of expats still in the country. Well, now, Fawzia Koofi is a peace negotiator and former Afghan Member of Parliament, and she survived a number of assassination attempts during her career fighting for women's rights in Afghanistan. I spoke to her a little earlier and asked her what the situation in Kabul, where she is now, is like.
At this stage, comparing to the fact that there is active war almost in all the provinces, Kabul seemed to be the safest for people who flee the war and destruction in the provinces. So Kabul is very, very crowded. At the meantime, of course, there are fears and concerns that Taliban have captured Logar, which is just across Kabul, Maidan Wardak. There is active war. So there are fears based on in the history that I have also lived in Kabul. Once Logar is captured, its access to Kabul becomes very, very easy.
You've negotiated with the Taliban over many years. Is it possible that they have, how can one put it, that they have mellowed, that we are getting perhaps now Taliban light, a more modernised version of the Taliban that the West can and indeed should do business with?
I have negotiated with them. Those Taliban who negotiate with us in the five-star hotels in Doha or Moscow or other places, they have been issuing statements and press releases about the fact that their position have changed, about women's rights, that they will allow women to go to school, to go to work, that they will respect women's liberty. Of course, they also say within the context of Islamic principles. However, in the places that Taliban control, including my constituents, we have been receiving evidences and reports and even calls and contacts from the people that the Taliban do not let them to go to, especially women, to go out of their homes without a male companion. And we know that a lot of people, women have lost their male companion, husband, brothers, father in the war. And plus this undermines women's liberty and human being nature and dignity of a woman. Also forced marriages, reports of forced marriages. So we need to really make a lot of efforts to make themselves relevant and make those generic statements that they have been issuing implementable to their foot soldiers.
The UK has fought 4 wars in Afghanistan and lost them all. Isn't it time to just simply let Afghans run Afghanistan?
The world came to Afghanistan not based on the invitation of Afghans. They came to Afghanistan because their own security was at risk in 2001. We're very grateful for what you did, the strategic partnership. But remember, Afghans were in the full front of, everything, protecting democracy, fighting the military extremism. Now the world decided to leave Afghanistan. President Biden announced that he will leave unconditionally, same as the other allies, including the UK, without knowing that if they could extend their stay for 1 year or less than a year, we could reach a political agreement. Because we were in the middle of negotiation, both sides were trying to come to some sort of agreement. When the Taliban heard that the US is withdrawing without any condition, and this is something Taliban have been fighting for, they thought that they have a victory. They don't need this, see the need for a political settlement.
Does it necessarily follow that the Taliban having control of Afghanistan, and let's face it, that appears to be where we're going, automatically means Al-Qaeda have a place there as well?
If Afghanistan is in a situation as it is now, lawlessness, lack of strong institutions and leadership, in many places only the weapons and the guns have the say, no rule of law. In such a situation, of course, anybody can use the soils of Afghanistan, and potentially Afghanistan can be a threat to the world's security.
That was Kufi talking to me earlier from Kabul. Well, I've also been speaking to the Labour MP and Mayor of South Yorkshire, Dan Jarvis. Now, he's served 3 tours of Afghanistan with the Parachute Regiment. I asked him, what are the West's strategic objectives in Afghanistan now?
The international coalition that previously deployed to Afghanistan, I think, faces a big choice at the moment about what to do. But it's particularly concerning that there doesn't seem to be any activity around drawing together that coalition of partners to reach a consensus of about what more can be done to support the Afghan government, and what happens if Kabul falls to the Taliban as it looks increasingly likely that it will do.
Well, you say we took the decision. We didn't take the decision to leave. The Americans took the decision to leave. They cut a deal. They cut out all the governments, including the Afghan government, from that. And they then gave the Taliban a date on which they would be going. So the Taliban, all they had to do was put their feet up and await victory.
Well, I think that has already been shown to have been a strategic mistake. Once the Americans took the decision that they were going to depart, of course, it was inevitable that the British would have to do the same. But it does feel like we've abandoned the country, despite all the effort, the sacrifice, the resource that we put into Afghanistan over 20 years. It feels as if it's all been for nothing. So what's going to happen now? Where's the energy from the British government? What activity is taking place amongst NATO colleagues and with the UN? What high-level conversations are taking place with the Pakistan government? I don't get a sense that there's any activity around that. And I think the government needs to demonstrate that it's using its presidency of the G7 to work with partners in the region and with international allies to do everything that we possibly can, even at this late stage.
The UN
to support
the
the
UN
Afghan
couldn't
government.
cope with Bosnia. They're not going to be able to cope with Afghanistan.
No, but I think that we have a responsibility to the country, given the effort, the sacrifice that we've made. I think we need to look at whether there are things that we can be doing.
There are plenty of leaders around the world saying they've moved from anger to depression over what's happening. Let me ask you personally, as a former soldier, as a former paratrooper who served there, perhaps just in terms of your own feelings, and you're hearing the chat, I'm sure, amongst your former colleagues, what on earth do you and they make of it, looking at this complete, abject mess?
We're all heartbroken because we committed such a lot to the country. We risked everything. And many of our colleagues who we served alongside didn't come home. And this is a terrible moment for their families. They switch on their TV and they watch the unfolding horror in Afghanistan, knowing that their loved ones gave everything to that conflict. And it's all been largely for nothing. So that is why I do think that the British government need to mobilise activity internationally. It is an incredibly difficult and challenging and fast-moving situation, but let's see a bit of leadership. Let's get that dialogue open and let's see whether anything can be done. Maybe it can't be, but let's at least see what we can do, given the gravity of the situation and given that we do not want Afghanistan to go back to the lawless country that it was 20 or more years ago.
Dan, thanks very much indeed for your time. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks for covering.
Now, a magnitude 7.2 earthquake has struck western Haiti, with reports of several dead already and severe damage to the southern parts of the country. The US President Biden has ordered an immediate response to send help. The epicenter of the quake was about 90 miles from the capital, Port-au-Prince, at a depth of 10 kilometres, according to the US Geological Survey. It's believed that the destruction will be widespread and a high number of casualties are expected. These pictures were posted on Twitter and show terrified people running into the flooded streets in the aftermath of the quake. 6 aftershocks followed the quake, with 3 of at least a magnitude of 4.5. Haiti's Civil Protection Service said they've received reports of a number of casualties. Now, in 2010, tens of thousands of people were killed in the country when a magnitude 7 quake struck much closer to the capital at a shallower depth. 1.5 million were made homeless. To Plymouth now, and the IOPC, the Independent Office for Police Conduct, has launched an investigation into why officers returned Jake Davidson's gun and firearms permit to him last month after they'd taken them away following an alleged assault. Davidson then shot dead 5 people, including his mother and a 3-year-old child, before taking his own life. 2 other people were also wounded in what was the country's worst mass shooting in a decade. Claire Fallon joins us now from Plymouth. Claire.
Tragic beyond words. That was what the Home Secretary had to say today. She came to Plymouth to talk to people affected and to pay her respects to the victims. We heard less from her, though, on gun laws and the measures that are in place that are meant to protect us. From the Labour leader, though, there are questions being asked. He says he wants to look at a review of our gun laws, but also questions about what happened here and whether there were warnings missed, whether the decisions that were made about that gun licence were the right ones, whether posts online about mass shootings by the gunman a few weeks ago should have been noticed and acted on. And there are plenty of people now saying that this must be a moment when we do more to ensure it doesn't happen again. In a park where last night people came to light candles for the victims, the Home Secretary brought flowers today, alongside a chief constable whose police force gave the killer his gun and firearms licence back the month before he murdered 5 people on the nearby streets. Home Secretary, when you found out that the gun had been returned last month, what was your reaction to that? Questions about why police considered Jake Davison to be safe and stable enough to legally own a gun went unanswered, but will be looked at by the Independent Office for Police Conduct. The decision to reinstate the licence came months after it had been taken off Jake Davison because he'd been accused of assault. His own mother, Maxine Davison, was one of the 5 people he murdered on Thursday night. Also, Lee Martin, who tried to shield his 3-year-old daughter Sophie from the gunfire. Both were killed. Stephen Washington, shot dead while walking his dogs. Kate Shepherd, she died in hospital that night. All of them remembered last night as hundreds of people who live in this area came together, struggling to believe the area they call home was the scene of the first mass shooting in the UK for 11 years.
Keyham's got an amazing community, and we will stick together through this crisis.
Those who organised the vigil were back here today to meet the Home Secretary and talk about the impact of Thursday night's events, an impact they know will be felt for years.
On September 11th, every single person in Keyham knows exactly where they were when this happened, and the hurt is deep.
While questions are asked about the mental state of Jake Davison, with the police watchdog investigating what police knew, whether they acted in the right way, there are concerns too about the impact on the many children who saw what happened. Among them, a severely autistic teenager. His support worker told me he'd followed an unarmed police officer who was in the area.
I mean, the police that was with us, that was first on scene, I suppose, because they were just round the corner. So, you know, it literally unfolded all in front of him. So it would have been hard to kind of process that in anybody's head, let alone somebody with you know, additional needs.
Alongside the trauma and grief, there is anger too. The Labour leader has suggested gun control should be looked at again, echoed today by the MP for this area, who says there must be transparency about the decisions that were made. When you found out that the gun had been returned last month, what were your thoughts?
I was a bit broken anyway when I saw that news, and that made me even more so. I think this community deserves the truth, and I want to see if there are problems with the systems that need to be improved and repaired, but I don't want to see any other community anywhere in Britain going through what we did over the last couple of days. That means we've got to have those difficult questions asked, and we need the right answers. And if they are difficult, then so be it, because we've got an entire community grieving here, we've got families grieving, we've got a 3-year-old girl killed. We need to get those proper answers.
This is a place where people know each other. That means there are many grieving and many who feel broken.
To Ireland now, where the COVID vaccine is being rolled out to children between the ages of 12 and 15. Some 75,000 in that age group have already registered. They'll be offered the Pfizer or Moderna jabs and will need the consent of a parent or guardian first. And here, the Health Secretary, Sajid Javid, has announced that the cost of coronavirus PCR tests for travellers returning to the UK from their summer holidays will be cut, saying testing must be made available at reasonable prices for families. Sport now, and Old Trafford played host to a capacity crowd for the first time in 19 months as 75,000 fans watched Manchester United put Leeds United to the sword. The home crowd didn't have to wait long. Bruno Fernandes claiming the first of what would prove to be a hat-trick just before the half-hour mark. Leeds defender Luke Ayling made it 1 each just after the break, but 2 goals in 3 minutes from Mason and Greenwood, and Fernandes again, and Leeds' fate was settled. Fernandes' hat-trick came soon after, before a punishing 5th from the Brazilian Fred. Coming up after the break, American scientists confirm that July was the hottest month ever recorded, driven by soaring temperatures sparking heat waves and wildfires across the globe. Welcome back. Now, July was the hottest month ever recorded, according to the American government scientists. Both global land and ocean temperatures were 0.9 degrees centigrade above the 20th century average. So countries from Asia to Europe to America have been scorched by heat waves and wildfires, while extreme weather in another form, flooding, has also left a trail of devastation. Here's Simeon Brown.
This is a town that is being drowned. Bozkurt off the coast of Turkey's Black Sea region is in mourning as villagers return. Their home is now inhospitable. The apartments decayed by furious flooding that has turned their town into a tomb. Today the death toll surpassed 40 and many more are still missing.
Halamın çocukları var. Ya halam yok. Halamın eşi yok. Torunları yok, ikizler. Yöneticimizin Musa Genç'in eşi yok, 2 tane çocuğu yok.
This search has become even more desperate as the survival chances diminish each day. And those who did escape with their lives are scarred by trauma. This summer, Turkey has been besieged by extreme weather that is intensifying everywhere. This is Japan today. Torrential rain in the southwest of the country has forced 1.4 million people to flee as cars swim through floods to escape an escalating crisis. It's not just floods that are becoming more extreme, heat is too. This is Spain today. The south is in the grip of a record-breaking heat wave expected to surpass 47 degrees centigrade.
Es insoportable. Esto es tremendo. Estamos acostumbrados en Andalucía, pero es que ya se está pasando esto. Esto es horroroso. No descansamos de noche ni de día.
In the face of such abrasive and disruptive heat, firefighters are on standby, and there are official directives to stay cool.
Dice que incluso podía rozar los 50 las zonas más centrales. 50 lo hemos visto. Sí.
But the global fight back against rising heat will require more than this. Today, new data from the National Centre for Environmental Information shows that last July was the hottest ever recorded. The climate crisis has set dangerous new precedents everywhere. This is Siberia. Temperatures this summer have been higher than average, intensifying almost 300 active forest fires in Russia. And this smoke has travelled 3,000 kilometres to the North Pole. Every day in the countdown to COP26, saving the planet becomes more urgent.
And so to tonight's main news. Whilst we've been on air, it's been reported that the northern Afghan city of Mazar-e-Sharif has now fallen to the Taliban. The insurgents are now advancing on the Afghan capital, Kabul, and are believed to be about 40 miles from the city. That's it. We're back tomorrow at 6:30 again. Till then, that is Channel 4 News. Have a great evening.